Arrogant rookie officer challenges a black judge's authority. What happens next stuns everyone. The Metropolitan Courthouse hummed with the familiar rhythm of justice files, shuffling whispered consultations, the occasional bang of Judge Marcus Carter's gavel, maintaining order in courtroom 4. At 58, Judge Carter was a fixture on the bench, respected for his fairness and feared for his intolerance of unprepared attorneys. His distinguished career had earned him a reputation that extended far beyond the courthouse walls, from his humble beginnings as a public defender to becoming the first black judge appointed to the district court in a city still wrestling with its racial divides. Today, his courtroom was packed for the usual Monday morning arraignments. Public defenders juggling impossible caseloads, prosecutors organizing files, and families anxiously awaiting their loved ones' appearances. In the front row sat Darnell Washington's grandmother, her Bible clutched tightly in weathered hands, praying silently for her 19-year-old grandson charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer, charges that could send him to prison for years. Officer Savannah Mitchell stood near the prosecution table, her uniform pressed to perfection, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun. At 24, she was only 6 months out of the academy, but already she carried herself with the confidence, some would say arrogance, of a veteran. The daughter of a retired police captain, Savannah had graduated top of her class, her path to law enforcement paved by family connections and a lifetime of being told she was exceptional. "The system works if you work it right," her father had always said. She'd taken those words to heart during her training at the academy, where certain instructors had pulled her aside for real-world education on how to control situations, write reports that would stick in court, and ensure justice was served their version of it anyway. Darnell Washington's case was supposed to be straightforward, another resistant suspect subdued by proper police procedure, according to Officer Mitchell's report. The body cam footage had been unfortunately corrupted during the incident, a technical glitch she'd explained to her supervisor, who hadn't asked further questions. What Officer Mitchell didn't know was that Judge Carter had received an envelope that morning containing a cell phone video of the arrest footage that told a very different story than her official report. The judge had reviewed it in his chambers, his expression growing darker with each passing second. As the bailiff called the court to order, Judge Carter's gaze settled on Officer Mitchell, noting her confident stance and the slight smirk that played at the corners of her mouth as Darnell Washington was led in handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit. "Commonwealth versus Washington," the clerk announced. "Charges of resisting arrest and assault on a police officer." Judge Carter adjusted his glasses. "Before we proceed, I'd like to address a matter that has come to the court's attention." He held up a USB drive. "The court has received video evidence pertaining to this arrest that I believe all parties should review immediately." Officer Mitchell's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty that quickly hardened into defiance. The collision course between a rookie officer's arrogance and a judge's commitment to justice was set in motion with consequences neither could fully anticipate. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Carter's clerk set up a monitor facing the gallery. Officer Mitchell shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the first outward sign of discomfort breaking through her composed exterior. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interjected, "the Commonwealth hasn't been made aware of this video evidence. We request time to review it before it's shown in open court." Judge Carter fixed the prosecutor with a steady gaze. "Mr. Brennan, I received this evidence this morning. Given its relevance to today's proceedings and the defendant's continued detention, I believe immediate review is warranted." He turned to Darnell's public defender. "Ms. Lopez, any objections?" "None whatsoever, Your Honor," she replied, trying to mask her surprise at this unexpected development. Judge Carter nodded to his clerk. "Proceed." The video began playing its slightly shaky footage, clearly captured by a bystander's phone. It showed Darnell Washington walking home from his night shift at the hospital cafeteria, still in his work uniform. Officer Mitchell's patrol car pulled alongside him, spotlights illuminating his confused expression. The audio was clear enough to hear Officer Mitchell's voice. "Hey, you stop right there." Darnell stopped, hands visible at his sides. "Yes, officer. Is something wrong?" "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. Let me see some ID." "May I ask why I'm just walking home from work?" Darnell's voice was respectful but questioning. The video showed Officer Mitchell exiting her vehicle, hand already on her weapon. "I don't have to explain myself to you. ID now, or you're obstructing?" As Darnell slowly reached for his wallet, Officer Mitchell suddenly lunged forward, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. "Stop resisting," she shouted, though the video clearly showed Darnell offering no resistance. "I'm not resisting. I was getting my ID like you asked." Darnell's voice rose in panic as he was slammed against the patrol car. The most damning moment came next. As Darnell stood, compliant, handcuffed against the vehicle, Officer Mitchell could be heard saying to her partner, who had just arrived, "Add assaulting an officer. He swung at me before I got him controlled. These people need to learn respect." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Judge Carter paused the video. Darnell's grandmother wept silently, her Bible pressed to her chest. Officer Mitchell's face had drained of color, but her posture remained rigid, defiant. "Officer Mitchell," Judge Carter's voice cut through the noise, silencing the room instantly. "Would you care to explain the discrepancy between this video and your sworn statement in which you claim Mr. Washington and I, quote, became combative and struck you in the chest before you were able to subdue him?" All eyes turned to the young officer. For a moment she seemed frozen, caught between the truth evident on screen and the narrative she constructed in her report. Then her training kicked in, the unofficial lessons from veteran officers about never backing down, never admitting error. "Your Honor, the video doesn't capture the entire interaction. Before this footage begins, the suspect was aggressive and—" Judge Carter held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Officer Mitchell, are you suggesting there was a physical altercation that somehow occurred before this video? Yet Mr. Washington shows no signs of resistance in the footage we just witnessed." "The camera angle is misleading, Your Honor. From my perspective—" "Your perspective," Judge Carter interrupted, his voice measured but firm, "is contradicted by objective evidence. This court takes sworn testimony seriously, Officer Mitchell." The prosecutor, sensing disaster, quickly intervened. "Your Honor, the Commonwealth requests a brief recess to confer with the arresting officer." Judge Carter studied the prosecutor, then Officer Mitchell, whose defiance had begun to crack around the edges, revealing something closer to fear. "Granted. 30 minutes. When we reconvene, I expect the Commonwealth to be prepared to address the status of these charges." He turned to the defense table. Ms. Lopez, I suggest you and your client be prepared as well. As the courtroom began to clear, Judge Carter added, Officer Mitchell, you will remain available to this court, and I advise you to consider very carefully what testimony you offer when we reconvene. In the hallway outside, Prosecutor Brennan cornered Officer Mitchell. What the hell happened out there? Your report is completely contradicted by that video. That's not the whole story, Mitchell insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. These situations are complicated. You know how these neighborhoods are. Stop. Brennan cut her off, looking around to ensure they weren't overheard. Listen to me carefully. Judge Carter doesn't play games. He was a civil rights attorney before joining the bench, and he's sent officers to jail for perjury before. For the first time, real fear flickered across Officer Mitchell's face as the gravity of her situation began to sink in. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Prosecutor Brennan approached the bench, his usual confidence replaced by a careful formality. Your Honor, in light of the video evidence, the Commonwealth moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Washington without prejudice. Judge Carter studied the prosecutor. Without prejudice, Mr. Brennan, you're leaving the door open to refile charges. Standard procedure, Your Honor, while we conduct a full investigation into the circumstances. I see. Judge Carter turned to the defense table. Ms. Lopez, Darnell's public defender, rose. Your Honor, we move for dismissal with prejudice. The video clearly shows my client committed no crime. Furthermore, we intend to file a civil rights complaint regarding his treatment. Judge Carter nodded. The charges against Mr. Washington are dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Washington, you are free to go. He turned his attention to Officer Mitchell, who stood stiffly beside the prosecutor. Officer Mitchell approached the bench. As she stepped forward, Judge Carter's voice lowered, though in the hushed courtroom, his words remained audible to all present. Officer, this court has serious concerns about your conduct, both during this arrest and in your subsequent reporting. I am referring this matter to Internal Affairs and the District Attorney's Office for investigation into possible charges of filing a false report and civil rights violations. Mitchell's face flushed. Your Honor, with all due respect, you don't understand the realities of policing, split-second decisions. Officer Mitchell, Judge Carter, interrupted, his voice taking on an edge that silenced her immediately. I understand the realities of policing quite well. I also understand the reality of a young black man being wrongfully arrested and facing years in prison based on fabricated charges. That is not policing, that is abuse of power. He leaned forward slightly. And let me be very clear, with all due respect followed by disrespect is still disrespect. This court is not the place for you to lecture anyone about realities you've experienced for 6 months, particularly not to a judge who has spent 30 years in this justice system. Mitchell's posture stiffened further. Yes, Your Honor, she replied, though her tone conveyed anything but acceptance. You are dismissed, officer. I suggest you secure legal representation. As Mitchell turned to leave, Judge Carter added, and officer, your body cam footage that was allegedly corrupted, this court is issuing an order for forensic recovery of that data. Technology can be quite remarkable these days. The color drained from Mitchell's face as she walked back down the aisle past the gallery where Darnell was now embracing his weeping grandmother, past fellow officers whose expressions ranged from concern to distance, already creating separation from what they recognized as a career in free fall. Outside the courthouse, reporters who had gotten wind of the dramatic turn of events waited with cameras and microphones. Officer Mitchell pushed past them without comment, her mind racing between denial, anger, and the first creeping tendrils of doubt about everything she'd been taught. Meanwhile, in his chambers, Judge Carter made 2 phone calls, one to the chief of police, with whom he had a long and complicated relationship dating back to their days on opposite sides of civil rights cases, and another to an old colleague now working for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. "James," he said, when the DOJ attorney answered, "I think we may have found the thread to pull on that police training issue we've discussed. How quickly can you get a team here?" The investigation that began with one rookie officer's arrogance was about to expose something far more systemic, a cancer within the department that had been growing for years, metastasizing through the ranks, infecting each new generation of officers with dangerous ideas about power, authority, and who deserved justice. And at the center of it all was Officer Savannah Mitchell, whose certainty about her place in the world was crumbling by the hour. 3 days later, Officer Mitchell sat in a sterile conference room at Internal Affairs, her attorney beside her, watching as investigators played the recovered footage from her body cam footage that, far from being corrupted, had been deliberately deleted but recovered by forensic technicians. The footage was damning. Not only did it confirm the bystander's video, but it captured moments before and after that, painted an even more troubling picture. Most incriminating was a conversation with her field training officer 2 weeks earlier, preserved because she had forgotten to turn off her camera after a different arrest. "Listen, rookie," the veteran officer had told her, "the camera is your enemy unless you make it your friend. Always say, stop resisting, even when they're not. It creates an audio record. If something goes sideways, report a technical issue with the footage. It is backed up for weeks. By the time anyone reviews it, if they ever do, the case will be pleaded out." Mitchell watched her past self, nodding eagerly, absorbing these instructions like gospel. Now that same advice had led her to this room facing potential criminal charges and the end of her career. "Officer Mitchell," the Internal Affairs investigator said, pausing the playback, "would you like to revise your previous statement about the technical malfunction of your body cam?" Her attorney placed a cautioning hand on her arm, but Mitchell had spent the past 3 days in a state of escalating crisis. The foundations of her identity, her father's legacy, her training, her belief in the system she served were cracking beneath her. "I deleted it," she said quietly, ignoring her attorney's sharp intake of breath. "I was taught to, not officially, but it was part of the real training, the stuff they tell you after hours." "Who taught you this?" the investigator pressed. Mitchell looked up, something resolute forming in her expression. "Everyone. It's not one person. It's how the system actually works. The academy teaches one thing, but once you're in the field, your FTO teaches you how things really get done." Her attorney interrupted. "My client needs a moment." "No," Mitchell said firmly. "I need to say this." She turned back to the investigator. "I was wrong. What I did to Mr. Washington was wrong, but I was trained to do it. I was taught that this is how you establish control, how you make sure the right people get charged. There are different rules for different neighborhoods, different people." The room fell silent as the implications of her statement expanded, beyond one wrongful arrest to suggest a pattern of institutional misconduct. "Officer Mitchell," the investigator said carefully, "are you saying this is departmental practice?" Before she could answer, the door opened and Chief Williams entered his face, a mask of controlled fury. "This interview's over. Officer Mitchell is suspended pending termination effective immediately. Turn in your badge and gun." Mitchell stood shaking slightly but holding her ground. "Chief, this isn't just about me. This is happening all over the department. You know it is." "That's enough, Mitchell. You've done enough damage." As she was escorted out, Mitchell caught a glimpse of a news broadcast playing in an adjacent office, footage of protesters gathering outside the courthouse, holding signs with Darnell Washington's image and the words, "Who else?" emblazoned beneath it. The crisis had moved beyond her personal failing to illuminate something much larger, a systemic rot that had been festering for years, now exposed to public scrutiny because one rookie officer had challenged the wrong judge. That evening, as Mitchell sat alone in her apartment surrounded by family photos, her father in uniform, her academy graduation, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Mitchell, this is James Harrington from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Judge Carter suggested I reach out to you. I think we should talk." The federal courthouse imposed a different kind of authority than the local criminal courts, older, more solemn, with the weight of national rather than local power. Savannah Mitchell felt that weight as she was led through security, no longer wearing a uniform, but a simple navy blue suit her mother had brought over, along with tearful questions she couldn't answer. 6 weeks had passed since Judge Carter had exposed the video contradicting her report. In that time, her world had collapsed and reformed around a single difficult truth: she had been wrong. Not just factually wrong about Darnell Washington's arrest, but fundamentally wrong in how she understood her role as an officer, the nature of justice, and her place in the system. The Department of Justice investigation had expanded rapidly, with Mitchell's testimony providing a crucial window into training practices that had corrupted multiple generations of officers. What began as one case of false reporting had revealed a multi-state network of police trainers teaching techniques for evading accountability, manipulating evidence, and targeting specific communities. Today, Mitchell would testify before a federal grand jury about everything she had learned both as a cadet and during her brief time on the force. Her cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors offered limited immunity in exchange for complete honesty, a bargain that saved her from prison but not from the consequences of her actions. As she waited outside the grand jury room, Mitchell saw a familiar figure approaching Judge Marcus Carter, his robes replaced by a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. "Your Honor," she said, standing reflexively. "Ms. Mitchell," he replied, emphasizing her civilian status. "I understand you're testifying today." "Yes, sir. About everything." Judge Carter studied her for a moment. "You know, when I received that video of Mr. Washington's arrest, I expected defiance, denial, and the blue wall closing ranks. I did not expect the officer involved to become the key witness in a federal investigation." Mitchell looked down. "I didn't expect it either." What changed? The question hung between them, simple yet profound. "When I watched that video in your courtroom," Mitchell said slowly, "I saw myself through someone else's eyes for the first time. I saw what I'd become in just 6 months on the job." She paused. And I saw my father in that footage too. All the lessons he taught me, not in what he said, but in what he did. How power changed him, how it was changing me. Judge Carter nodded. Power reveals Ms. Mitchell. It doesn't corrupt so much as expose what was already there waiting for permission to emerge. I'm trying to make it right, she said. I know it doesn't fix what I did to Mr. Washington. No, it doesn't, the judge interrupted. Mr. Washington spent 3 nights in jail for nothing. His grandmother missed dialysis waiting at the courthouse for his arraignment. He lost his job. Those consequences don't disappear because you found your conscience. Mitchell absorbed the rebuke without protest. I know, but Judge Carter continued, his tone softening slightly. Your testimony may prevent others from suffering the same fate. There's value in that. Before Mitchell could respond, the door opened and a federal prosecutor appeared. We're ready for you, Ms. Mitchell. Judge Carter gave her a final appraising look. Remember, complete honesty requires admitting not just what happened, but why it happened. The grand jury needs to understand how good intentions become corrupted and how systems fail. They need to understand how you failed. With those words echoing in her mind, Mitchell entered the grand jury room. For the next 4 hours, she detailed everything, the unofficial training sessions where officers were taught to manipulate evidence and escalate situations to justify arrests. The coded language used to identify problem individuals, usually young men of color. The practice of testi lying to secure convictions, and the culture of silence that protected officers who crossed the line. She named names, provided dates, and turned over text messages and recordings she had begun collecting after her suspension when she realized the depth of the corruption she had been drawn into. When asked why she had participated, her answer was unflinching: because I believed I was right. Because I was taught that some people needed to be controlled rather than protected. Because I thought my badge gave me authority without accountability. As Mitchell testified across town, Darnell Washington sat in Judge Carter's chambers listening as the judge explained the expanding investigation. Your case broke it open, Judge Carter told him, but you paid a high price for that justice. Darnell nodded, the trauma of his arrest and detention still evident in his wary posture. My grandmother says everything happens for a reason. I'm not sure I believe that, but if what happened to me stops it from happening to someone else. The city has approved a settlement for your wrongful arrest, Judge Carter said, sliding a document across the desk. It won't erase what happened, but it might help you rebuild. Darnell looked at the figure, enough to pay for the community college courses he'd been saving, for enough to help his grandmother with her medical bills, enough to start over. There's something else, Judge Carter continued. The Community Oversight Board we've been fighting for over the past decade, the mayor has finally agreed to it with real power to review police conduct. They've asked if you would consider serving as a member. Me, but I'm nobody. You're exactly who needs to be at that table, Judge Carter interrupted. Someone who has experienced injustice firsthand and still believes in the possibility of change. As Darnell considered this unexpected turn, Mitchell concluded her testimony before the grand jury. The forewoman thanked her, and as Mitchell rose to leave, she asked one final question. Do you regret becoming a police officer? Mitchell paused, considering carefully. I regret the officer I became, but I don't regret learning how broken the system is from the inside. You can't fix what you don't understand. 3 months later, the federal courthouse was again the center of attention as indictments were announced against 27 officers, including 4 police academy trainers and 3 high-ranking department officials. The charges ranged from civil rights violations to obstruction of justice, with the investigation expanding to 3 neighboring jurisdictions where similar practices had been identified. Mitchell, now working as a paralegal while studying criminal justice reform, watched the press conference on television, recognizing faces of former colleagues and supervisors among those charged. Her own legal situation remained complicated. She had avoided federal charges through her cooperation agreement, but still faced state charges for filing a false report reduced from felony to misdemeanor in exchange for her testimony. Her phone rang, her father calling for the first time since the scandal broke. "I saw the indictments," he said, his voice gruff. "Your former sergeant was my rookie 20 years ago." "I know, Dad." A long silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken accusations and defenses. "What you did," he finally said, testifying against other officers. "When I was on the force, we would have called that betrayal." "And what would you call what they did to people like Darnell Washington?" she countered. "What would you call what they taught me to do?" Another silence. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, his certainty cracking for perhaps the first time in his life. The job, it changes how you see things. After a while, you stop questioning. That's the problem, Dad. We're supposed to question ourselves most of all. After hanging up, Mitchell prepared for her most difficult meeting, yet a restorative justice session with Darnell Washington, facilitated by a community organization specializing in healing harm caused by the justice system. She had requested the meeting. Darnell had eventually agreed, though his attorney had advised against it. They met in a neutral space, a community center conference room with soft lighting and a circular arrangement of chairs. A facilitator welcomed them, establishing ground rules before leaving them to speak directly to each other. Darnell spoke first, his voice steady but tight with controlled emotion. "I want to know why, not the big reasons about training and culture. I want to know why me that night. I was just walking home from work." Mitchell forced herself to maintain eye contact, though shame made her want to look away. "Because you questioned me," she admitted. "Not disrespectfully, but you asked why I stopped you, and I was taught to see questions as challenges to my authority. And—" She hesitated, then forced herself to speak the hardest truth, "because of where we were and who you are, and who I assumed you were because of those things." "You mean because I'm black?" "Yes." The simplicity of the exchange, the question, and the honest answer created a moment of clarity between them. "I lost my job because I missed 3 days of work in jail," Darnell said. "My grandmother missed dialysis sitting in court waiting for me. I still have nightmares about being handcuffed. That's what your assumption did." Mitchell nodded, accepting his words without defense. "I know sorry isn't enough. It doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry, and I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen to others." "By testifying against other cops?" "Yes, and by speaking at the academy about what happened, about how quickly good intentions can be corrupted if you don't question what you're being taught." Darnell studied her. "They let you speak to cadets after everything." "Judge Carter arranged it. He said cadets need to hear from someone who made the wrong choices, not just from those who made the right ones." The mention of Judge Carter shifted something in the atmosphere. "He's a good man," Darnell said. "He's helping me, too. I'm on the new oversight board reviewing police conduct cases." Mitchell looked surprised. That's good. The department needs that perspective." "Your perspective, too," Darnell said, surprising her further. "The oversight board needs to understand how officers are trained, how the culture shapes them. Would you be willing to speak to the board?" The request, coming from the man she had wronged so profoundly, left Mitchell momentarily speechless. "You would want that, after what I did?" "This isn't about forgiveness," Darnell clarified. "It's about change. Real change means understanding how things go wrong, not just punishing after the fact." As their conversation continued across town, Judge Carter presided over a different kind of proceeding, the first meeting of the newly formed Police Standards Commission, created by emergency legislation following the federal indictments. The commission, composed of legal experts, civil rights advocates, and law enforcement representatives, was tasked with completely overhauling police training and accountability measures. "We're not here to assign blame," Judge Carter told the assembled commission members. "We're here to rebuild a system that has failed both the public it's meant to protect and the officers sworn to serve. This will be difficult, contentious work. There will be resistance from those invested in the status quo, but the cost of continuing as we have is too high." He displayed a photograph on the large screen behind him, Darnell Washington's booking photo, taken the night of his wrongful arrest. "This is the human cost of our failure. For every case that makes headlines, hundreds go unnoticed. Today, we begin the work of ensuring that this young man's experience becomes the exception rather than the rule." 1 year later, Savannah Mitchell stood at a podium in the Police Academy auditorium, facing a class of cadets just weeks away from graduation. Her appearance was part of a completely revamped ethics curriculum that now included first-hand accounts of how policing could go wrong. "When I stood where you're sitting now," she began, "I was certain about everything, my purpose, my authority, the bright line between right and wrong. That certainty nearly sent an innocent man to prison and ended my career in disgrace." The cadets watched her intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. "You've spent months learning tactics, laws, and procedures, but the most important skill in policing isn't taught in any manual. It's the ability to question yourself, especially when you're most certain you're right." From the back of the room, Judge Carter watched silently. Now serving as chair of the Police Standards Commission alongside his judicial duties, he had made these cadet addresses a requirement of the new training program. "The hardest lesson I learned," Mitchell continued, "is that a badge doesn't make you right. It only gives you power that must be used with humility and constant self-examination." After her presentation and a challenging Q&A session, Mitchell gathered her materials as the cadets filed out. Judge Carter approached accompanied by a familiar figure, Darnell Washington, now a full-time community liaison for the Oversight Board and part-time criminal justice student. "Effective as always, Ms. Mitchell," Judge Carter said. "The cadets seem to really hear you." "Some do," she acknowledged. "Others think they're immune to the mistakes I made, just like I did." Darnell nodded. "That's why we keep telling the story. Not everyone will listen, but some will." The three of them walked together toward the exit, an unlikely trio connected by a moment of injustice that had catalyzed significant change. The police department was still in the midst of painful transformation, old guards resisting new leadership, emerging community relationships being rebuilt one interaction at a time. The federal consent decree oversight ends next month, Judge Carter mentioned. The Department of Justice is satisfied with the progress. Is it enough? Mitchell asked. It's a beginning, Darnell replied. Real change takes time. Outside, they paused in the late afternoon sunlight. The academy looked the same as when Mitchell had graduated, the same flag, the same motto about service and protection. But inside, fundamental shifts were occurring in how officers were selected, trained, and held accountable. I have something to show you both, Judge Carter said, leading them to his car. He drove them to a neighborhood that Mitchell recognized immediately, the street where she had wrongfully arrested Darnell. But something was different. The vacant lot on the corner, once littered with trash and abandoned cars, had been transformed into a small community center. The Washington Community Justice Center, Judge Carter announced as they parked, named after someone who turned personal injustice into community action. Darnell looked stunned. After me, but I didn't do anything special. I just stood up for myself. Sometimes that's the most important action of all, the judge replied, standing up when it would be easier to give in. The center housed the Community Oversight Board offices, a legal aid clinic, and meeting spaces for restorative justice programs. A plaque by the entrance commemorated its purpose, where healing begins and justice evolves. As they toured the facility, Mitchell felt the weight of her past actions alongside the possibility of redemption through change. She would never wear a badge again, nor should she. But her experience, both her failure and her subsequent commitment to reform, had become part of something constructive. Later, as Judge Carter dropped them off at their respective destinations, he left them with a final thought. Justice isn't a destination we reach once and for all. It's a path we choose every day in small decisions and large ones. The question isn't whether we'll achieve perfect justice, but whether we'll keep moving toward it, especially when it's difficult. Mitchell watched his car disappear around the corner, then turned toward her apartment building. On her desk inside waited law school applications, a new path forward she hadn't imagined for herself a year ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Saw your presentation to the cadets on the department live stream. You gave them a lot to think about. Me too. It wasn't forgiveness or full reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, a small step toward healing a relationship fractured by different understandings of what justice meant and how authority should be wielded. As she walked up the steps to her building, Mitchell reflected on how a single moment of arrogance in Judge Carter's courtroom had collapsed her world, only to rebuild it with a clearer vision and purpose. The system was still flawed, the work far from complete, but for the first time since that fateful day, she felt something like hope, not for her own redemption, but for the possibility that her greatest mistake might contribute to meaningful change. And in a neighborhood across town, Darnell Washington sat with his grandmother on their porch, showing her the community center brochure with his name on it. See, Grandma, something good did come from all that trouble. His grandmother patted his hand, wisdom earned through decades of witnessing both injustice and progress. That's how change always happens, child. Not all at once, but person by person, story by story, until finally The world can't look away anymore.